People may say, "Whoa, your Blender skills are totally out of this world," after they see this planetary animation you make, but it's really not that hard. Let's walk through it. Ladies and gentlemen, it is I, Derek Elliott from Dirk.com, back today with a new tutorial, an ASMR planetary tutorial. I'm just kidding. It's not an ASMR tutorial, but people always seem to comment that my voice is very ASMR. It's a thank you or you're welcome. I don't know, depending on who you are. It's just the way I talk. Okay, can we please get on with the tutorial? Yes. So I'm going to delete most of my scene here. Actually, that's not true. I'm going to press X to delete the cube. That's just 1/3 of the scene, I suppose. And I'm going to add back in by pressing Shift A, add an icosphere. You could use a UV sphere too, but I like the icosphere. Just, I don't know. I like triangles, I guess. Something like that. Triangles are my favorite shape. I think there's a song about that or something. Right click to shade it smooth. Looking pretty good. We got a planet here. Now what you're going to do is scale it up by like a freaking million to get the accurate size of a planet. I'm just kidding. There were some people on my last tutorial, the picnic table one, that were saying I wasn't using accurate picnic table dimensions. Look, I get it. I don't care. It looked like a picnic table, okay? And now we're making freaking planets. And obviously we're not going to make them real planet size. So chillax, okay? Can we get on with the tutorial once again, please? So yeah, I'm gonna make some more planets inaccurately sized. I'm sorry. And the way I'm gonna do that is by pressing Shift D to duplicate, and then I'm gonna right click, and it's just gonna snap right back to where it was. But I can see that it is still there. And now in edit mode, I'm gonna press Tab to go into edit mode. I'm gonna bring this out on the Y-axis, G, Y to grab that on the Y-axis, and move it out somewhere like that. And then I'm going to scale it down. Maybe I want to move it out a little bit more. Something like that I think will be quite nice. And now the reason I did this in edit mode was so that the origin would stay right there in the center. So when I duplicated that object, it kept the origin in the center. But when I moved it in edit mode, the origin stayed where it was. So now when I press R and Z to rotate this around the Z axis, you can see it's rotating about that origin, which that's the way I think works best for doing something like this. It's just simple. You could do it with empties or any number of other methods, like most things in Blender. You can do it a million ways, but I think this works pretty well. So now I'm just going to go ahead and set up a couple more planets. So you can press 7 to go in your top view, or press this little button right here, and that'll take you into your top view. And now I'm just going to make a couple more planets, like I said. So maybe I want this one to be actually a little bit bigger. I'm going to press Shift D, and then again in edit mode, Tab, G, Y. Let's pull this one out a little bit. Maybe make it a little smaller. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to press Shift D, Tab into edit mode, G, Y to drag it out a little bit. And let's put this one right around here. Maybe make it kind of like that big. That looks pretty good. And then for this last planet, I think I want it to have sort of a little bit of a moon. So to get that set up, I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it, tab into edit mode, and then let's just bring this out on the X axis so it's a little easier to keep track of things. Scale it down, and then let's just bring that in a little bit. Something like that I think is going to look great. So now the concept I was explaining earlier about the origins has suddenly become an issue here. We obviously want this moon to rotate around this planet, so I need to move its origin to that planet. And the way I'm going to do that is by pressing Tab to go into edit mode on this planet, and then Shift S and snapping my cursor to selected, which is all these vertices, so it's the center basically. So now with my cursor there, I can tab out of edit mode, select this planet, right click, and set origin to geometry. And oops, that set it to its own geometry. I need to right click, set origin to 3D cursor. That's looking better. Nice, looking good. Okay, so that's pretty good. We're going to do a little bit of modeling after the fact to add some of those details like you saw in the intro. But I think what I'd like to do now is go ahead and set up a little bit of lighting and some colors. So let's go ahead and do that. If you've seen any of my tutorials before, you probably know what I'm about to do. Up here in the right hand corner, I'm going to click and drag over to set up some new viewports. And if you're having trouble with the right hand, or like clicking in the corner thing, it is a little tricky, I must say so myself. You can right click on any edges here. And actually, I think I need to do this edge. You can right click and split area. And then that works as well for creating new viewports. So yeah, this one I'm going to set up as my camera view. So I'm going to press, you can click this button or you can press 0 on your number pad. Either one of those will work. And then I'm going to switch this into a rendered view. And I'm in the Cycles render engine. You may be in Eevee. Oops, right there is the Cycles render engine. And since this is just going to be kind of my camera view, I'm going to turn off the toolbar over here by pressing T. And then I'm also going to turn off my overlays. So now we just have a kind of unobstructed view of what we're going to be rendering. And one thing I'm noticing though is that this needs to be zoomed out quite a bit. So this is a stylistic preference, but I wanted to change my camera from perspective to orthographic, just to give it a little more of a scientific look, since obviously this is very accurate. So something like that I think looks pretty good. And once we start rotating it, we'll see we may have to pull this out a little more. But I think that's good for now. So another thing I'll do is add a plane. Oops, and it added right there, which is fine. No, I'm definitely a perfectionist. We're gonna have to press Shift-C to snap our cursor back to the center. Shift-A, mesh plane. Let's move that down a little bit, something like that. And then just scale it up a little bit, just kind of till it's hitting the edges and it fills our frame there of the camera. That looks pretty good. Everybody knows there's a floor in space sitting about a foot below. Okay, no, we're not going to talk about the dimensions or the accuracy. Don't worry about it. So what we're going to do now is do a little more lighting. I've got this point lamp over here. Let's maybe, this is just going to give us some kind of nice shadows. I think I want to move it, and again, I'm looking in my rendered view here, kind of watching where these shadows are going. I think something like that is probably going to look pretty good. And then I don't want them to be quite so sharp, so let's change the size of this up a little bit. Something like that looks pretty good. And let's blast this baby with some light. Let's set the power to 5,000. I think that's going to look pretty sweet. Now I do want a little bit of a flat light kind of over the whole scene, so I'm going to press Shift-A and add a light, and that light is going to be an area lamp. Now with that there, I'm going to press G and Z just to bring it up a little bit. And since we're dealing with universal things, let's go ahead and make it a disc, because it's like it's circular. I don't know. Seems like a good idea to me. If you don't think so, you can leave it as a square, but I'm making it a circle. So just dragging this out a little bit, making it a little bit bigger. That's going to be good. Now we need to add some power to this too. Let's try something like 1500. That looks pretty good. Yeah, obviously I've done this before. I looked up the number beforehand. Fine, you caught me. But play with this value. Get something you like. It looks a little bit blown out now. I'll tell you the truth. That's what I think. But once we add the color, you'll see it looks pretty darn good. So let's go ahead and add that color. Now, the way we're going to do that is with the shader editor. So up here, I'm going to switch this into a shader editor. I guess I dragged that window out a little early, didn't I? So now that we have that as a shader editor, we can start setting up some materials. And now for the materials, do whatever colors you like. I encourage you to explore colors, but I'm not very good with colors. So what I did was actually find a color palette on this website that I'll pull up on the screen here for you now. Color Hunt, and it isn't sponsored or anything, but really cool colors on there by a guy named Gal Shear. I think he's an illustrator. Check out his work. Yeah, find a color palette. I'm going to drag out a window here and change this to an image editor because I already have loaded in my color palette. Oh, I thought I had it loaded in. Let's go and find it. There it is right there. And since I know somebody's going to ask, I went ahead and put the hex values on there so that you guys could copy them exactly. But shame on you if you copy my colors exactly. It's so easy to change the colors. Go find your own darn color palette. So now with those set up, I need to, well, I've got these here, and you'll see why having them there is very convenient in just a second. I'm going to set up the first color, which is going to be for this ground plane. And to do that, I'm going to go down here into the Materials tab. I'm going to press New. You could also do it up here. I'll do it up here. And I'm going to rename this material light blue because I think that's going to be the light blue color. And so to do that, to set up that color, I'm going to click here, click the little eyedropper, similar phraseology as in other softwares, the eyedropper. I don't know if phraseology is a word. Never mind. Stop talking about phraseology, Derek. Okay, so we've got the first color set up there. Now, the roughness value, I want to adjust a little bit. So if this was all the way down at 0, this would be a very shiny material. You can see we're getting some reflections there, very sharp. Oh yeah, there's the reflections right there. So don't want that. I want them to be pretty rough. So I'm going to drag this roughness all the way up to 0.9, just so it has a little bit of shimmer to it. And yeah, that's looking pretty good, just like that. So now, so that I can see things a little better in my viewport and just keep things all nice and accurate, I'm going to go down here into my viewport display settings and pick the color here as well. So now in the viewport, it shows up that way. And that's great. You don't have to do that, but it can help when you're organizing things later. So with that set up, I'm going to go ahead and add another material. I'm just going to make this one a light blue too, but what I'm going to do is press this little button right here. That'll create a duplicate of it. And I'm going to name this one red because I think for this second material, it's going to be the red. And I'm going to use the same process here to do that. And then similarly with the viewport color, we can do the same thing. So it shows up over here. Nice and organized. That's good. Let's set up a couple more colors. I think this one's going to be, we'll make that the dark blue. And then, so let's just name that. And you don't have to name your colors, but trust me, it makes things a little more organized. Similarly, I could be naming my planets over here, but I'm not going to do that. So select this, select this, select this. Looking good. I like that color. Now for the viewport color, we need to change that too. And instead of using eyedropper here, there's another cool trick you can do in Blender, which is just to hover over any color field, press Control C, and then over here, hover Control V. You don't actually have to click anything. Pretty cool, makes it nice and convenient. Now for this one, I think I want it to be the same red color. So let's just make that. And then this one, I think we'll go ahead and do the yellow color. So let's just set that to any of the colors. And then we'll name it yellow for yellow. Yeah, it's yellow. So we got that there. I'm gonna do the little Control C, Control V trick. Looking good. And now with all these set up, you can see this is a little bit of a tedious process, but once you've got the color set up, there's only 4 of them, then it's a little easier to move on and change things around if you need to, or just, yeah, just kind of play with things, adjust the colors. But I think this is a beautiful little balance of my colorful little planets. And by the way, these colors were selected by you, my Instagram followers, which I know you're watching this video on YouTube, but if you follow me on Instagram, I actually posted 2 color options and left it to a vote to decide which colors would make it into the tutorial. I guess people didn't know it was going to be for a tutorial, but the tribe has spoken and they wanted these colors. So, yeah, no, that's what we're going to do. I liked the other one too, but here, I threw them up on the screen for you so you can see the kind of 2 I was assigned in between. But anyways, those colors are looking good. Let's just add a couple more details like you saw in the intro. The first of which is going to be a little bit of a ring around here. Very planetary looking. I'm not an astrophysicist, but I think it's like an asteroid belt or something. So I'm going to press Shift A and add a circle. It's going to add it right there at the center, which is where that object is, which is great. And we're going to make this have 64 vertices just so it's a little bit smoother. And then I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode. Scale this out just a little bit and then press E to extrude it and then scale that out just a little bit. That looks pretty good. Now this is going to look a little silly if it's just 0 thickness, so I'm going to add some thickness with a solidify modifier. So we can just go over into our modifiers and add a solidify modifier. Now this is a very small detail, but so that this is kind of all nice and centered, I'm going to change this offset to 0. So that is looking swell. Let's go ahead and add a material to that. I'm going to press new up here and let's just name this translu because it's going to be translucent. So to do that, to make that material, that kind of translucent material, I'm going to turn up the transmission all the way to 1. And then it's like super rough right now. So let's turn this roughness down to maybe something like a 0.2. Now we have this kind of cool frosted plastic look, and maybe we even want to turn that down a little more. I think that looks pretty good. Now it is a little dark. When you create a new material, it starts with this color that's not quite perfect white. But if we bump that up to a perfect white, it does look nice and crispy clear. So now let's maybe, I'm pressing N by the way to bring up this sidebar. Let's give that a little bit of a rotation. Maybe like 20 degrees. Astrophysicists, leave comments. Let me know if that would ever happen. Oh yeah, and let's take a brief pause here. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Okay, yeah, I'll repeat all that at the end where I normally do. But yeah, if you're enjoying the video so far, give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment. Say, wow, I'm only halfway through, but this is awesome. I hope we're not only halfway through. I think we're further than that. But let's keep moving so that we can get finished up here. I've got that detail there. I love it. Let's go ahead and add one more detail, which is that little kind of spinner ring, like kind of like trail behind this other planet. So the way I'm going to do that is a little more complicated, but it's pretty easy. So we're going to press Shift A, add another circle. I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode, and I'm going to scale this up just so that it's kind of hitting the middle of that second planet there. Something like that looks pretty good. Press Alt Z to go into my X-ray mode, and then I'm just going to kind of delete. I'm going to delete a few of the vertices here just to give this a nice little trail. Let's maybe, and I did C to circle select. Let's just maybe get rid of like, I want to keep more than that. Let's get rid of about a quarter of them. That looks good. Now, obviously, we can't see this over here in the rendered view because there is no geometry to it. So the fastest way to do that is going to be by adding a skin modifier. And just about always, it is too big. So we are going to press Tab to go into edit mode, A to select everything, and then Control A to adjust the mean radius, which is this value here. You can see if we change this, it's adjusting those values. So if you press Control A, it's going to scale them both together. And I don't want this to be a square, but we'll take care of that in a second. But what I'm doing, I'm going to kind of create a little bit of a taper here. So I'll show you how to do that. But what I'm going to do first is get this set up to where it's about as thick as I'm going to want it. So something like that I think looks good. And the way we're going to make that taper is with proportional editing. So if you're familiar with proportional editing, normally if you would grab a vertice and just press G, it's just going to grab that one vertice. But with proportional editing enabled, which is this little button up here, or the shortcut O, you can you get this little kind of area of effect that will allow you to proportionally edit geometry. So that also works with a lot of other things in Blender. For example, the mean radius. Don't confuse it with the nice radius. You're not going to want to mess with this too long, otherwise it'll start being mean to you. That was a horrible joke. So yeah, I'm just kind of scaling this down a little bit with proportional editing enabled, and we're getting a very nice little taper effect there. I'm liking the way that looks, but like I said, I want to smooth this out a little bit more. So I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier, and yeah, now it's nice and smooth. I am liking the way that looks. Now, if you tried to right click and shade it smooth, it's not going to work. For some reason, in the skin modifier, you need to actually go in and click this little button right here, shade, smooth shading. So that's good. Let's give it a color. I'm thinking yellow. That looks good. Okay, so I'm gonna go back into my camera view here. That's looking pretty sweet, I'd say. So let's go ahead and do the meaty, juicy part of this, which is animating. So I think I'm gonna first animate this planet. If I R, we can see the trail's not coming with it. So I need to click, shift click, Control P, and that will allow me to bring up this parent menu, set parent to the object. And now when we rotate this, that little trail will come with it. And that is exactly the look I'm going for. Gosh, I just love that little trail. It's kind of like a 50s Astro style. I don't know. It's cool. I like it. That's why it's in the tutorial. Okay. So I'm gonna bring up this window here just so I have a little better view of my timeline. Let's set up the little moon rotation here first. So let's see, yeah, I want to rotate, well, we'll say that way. So this is important. Since I want this to be like kind of a looping animation, I want to have, you don't want to have the same frame at frame 1 and the end at frame 250, because that would mean there'd be a little hiccup where it would stay still for one frame. So I'm going to actually set my first frame on frame 0. So insert a single keyframe there. And then on frame 250, I will set you know, a full amount of rotations. And now since 360 degrees is one full rotation, I think I want this to do, let's say like 6 or 7. I'll do 7 rotations. So 7 times 360, enter, right click, insert single keyframe. And for the time being, I'm going to pause this over here just so my viewport's a little faster. Press spacebar to play it. It's looking pretty good. It's rotating. It loops, but it has this kind of slow down. And what that is easing. So if I go over here into my graph editor, and I can get rid of this view, by the way, I can see that that's the easing happening. So normally what I would do is press T right here and set that to linear. But what you can actually do is press T in here, and that will change the interpolation as well. So changing that to linear did this. Now you can't even tell when it starts and stops. It's like it's a perfect loop, which is exactly what I want. So that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and do a similar thing on the rest of these planets to set up their rotation. So let's go ahead and set up this one. And it looks like we have a little bit of a parenting issue here. The moon's not coming with it. So let's shift click that, control P, set parent to object, looking snazzy. And then now when I rotate this, yeah, the moon goes with it. That's perfect. So I got my, let's go ahead and set a single keyframe here for the rotation. And let's have this whole thing rotate maybe twice. So 360 times 2 is 720. Insert that keyframe. And then we can change this back to the shader editor. Or actually, we don't really need this anymore, but the point is I'm going to hide the graph editor to show you that we can press T right here and change this to linear. Now, this is a tip that someone left a comment on my last video, which, by the way, guys, I know a lot about Blender, but I'm not an expert, so there's always people giving me advice. And Decompiler, one of my favorite fans, left me a comment in one of my last videos showing me that you could make this adjustment in the timeline here. So, liking that tip, thank you, Decompiler. And so now this is, yes, that's looping correctly. So let's set up some rotation for this one. Insert a single keyframe for the Z, and then maybe we'll have this one rotate 3 times. So 3 times 360, 1080. Looking nice. Yeah. Oh wait, we need to do the press T, linear. And then let's just go ahead and set up this one. Maybe we'll have it rotate 4 times. So back here, frame 250, I'll do 360 times 4. Right click, insert single keyframe. Now we need to do the T linear. Now when we take a look at this, that's pretty much it. It's looking pretty good. There's one other thing I want to do that you saw, actually 2 things. So I want this to rotate just to be cool, and I'm going to have it rotate the other way. So I'm going to insert a single keyframe here, and then maybe we'll have it do one full negative rotation there, and then I'm going to press T to change that to linear, and now that kind of like spins around, and that's going to be really nice. It'll kind of show off this translucent material a little bit. You see the way it's kind of catching light at different angles. It's little things like that that can make your animation much more interesting. So that's good. And to add just a little bit more interest, because it was in the intro, I'm going to add keyframe a little bit of Z location here. So, oops, and we're going to need to snap this. Lots of parenting tips here today. Select set parent to object. And again, that's with control P. So now when I move this, the little ring will move with it. So insert a keyframe on the Z location, and then actually let's start it kind of like low, something like that. Oops, replace single keyframe. You could add all the keyframes, but since they're not changing, it's kind of helps keep things a little clean. So if it starts there, we need it to finish there. So I'm going to insert a keyframe there, insert single keyframe, and then maybe somewhere kind of in the middle, which would be 125 exactly, Mr. Perfectionist Derek. We'll pull that up to like a +3. So now it's got kind of a little bit of a bounce effect, and all these little details just add to kind of the way this animation looks. And the way it's looking now, I think, is pretty good. If you didn't want them to align right here, what you could do is go into your graph editor and maybe just like kind of move these up. I'm just pressing G and Y, and since the start and the end like difference isn't changing, they should still loop perfectly. And I did that just so that they don't end up having that total alignment ever. And it'll just keep things a little more dynamic, a little more interesting. But that pretty much does it for this tutorial, guys. I hope you really liked it. If you did, leave a comment. If you didn't, leave a comment. Please feel free to subscribe to me on Instagram and YouTube. Or yeah, follow me on Instagram and subscribe to me on YouTube so that you can see everything I do. If you make this from the tutorial, feel free to tag me. I would love to share it on my Instagram and or Reddit or something. Just like, you know, if you make it, post it, tag me. I'd love to see what you guys do. You could obviously do this with like 100 planets. If someone does that, definitely, I'd love to see it. It'd probably look really cool. And, you know, you can add more rings, add more moons, do whatever creative stuff you come up with. Again, I would really like to see it. So if you like the video, give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment. Let me know if you have suggestions for future tutorials. Maybe there's something in here you would have done differently. In any case, I really appreciate you watching. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Oh yeah, Planetary, baby. There's probably an angry astrophysicist in the comments typing right now. Maybe this will be my end screen where I just like talk randomly. Yeah, that sounds good to me.